Alright, let's start the video. I understand it's a holiday, but hey, I'm trying to get back to the weekly schedule and I can suck at keeping things on pace when I miss a day. So let's do a video today then, shall we? So let's redefine the word republic. Now, a republic in the modern parlance is not the same as the definition of a republic. A republic, officially, is just a country without a king or a monarch. So, for example, let's take Rome, because that's where we get republics from, at least modern ideas in regards to republics. So Rome actually was not a republic initially, though we often think of it as a republic that turned into an empire, which did happen. Rome officially was a kingdom first. So you have Rome as a kingdom, and then it became a republic, then an empire, and then a conquest. Now, how the Roman Republic was initially defined was just the fact that they got rid of the kings and they didn't like kings, because the last one was accused of some very, very severe things. Needless to say, they didn't like him, so they overthrew him, and thus began the Roman Republic, which, it's worth noting, was not egalitarian in most senses. It was very oligarchic. So, the real distinction, of course, was just no king at first. Now, there's a problem with keeping it this way. Keeping the definition of republic is just without a monarch makes it very difficult to actually make a real political stance with it, because let's think about all the different ways a country can run. You can have a monarchy, both autocratic and constitutional. Constitutional doesn't necessarily mean it has to have suffrage, but just some limits on the monarch's power. The monarch can't just decide everything. Then you have theocracies. And you can have elected or inherited theocracies. For those who don't know, the Papal States is elected, and for several other theocracies throughout the world, they are simply inherited. For example, the Caliphate. Yeah, the medieval caliphates were inherited, and so you would have Umayyads, for example, who would have the caliph, and then his firstborn son would inherit, and it would go on from there. And when the Abbasids took over, same thing. And then, of course, you have republics, in the sense we tend to use them traditionally, which can be parliamentary and presidential. Keep in mind, this is how we use the words colloquially, not necessarily the actual definitions. Then there's dictatorships, of which there are many varieties. So to say, pick, really. You got military dictatorships, you got civilian dictatorships based on, say, a president who just said, yep, I'm in charge now. You have socialist dictatorships based on an ideology. Basically, so long as the dictator just says, I'm in charge, and lacks any other reason besides, I kind of like this thing, yeah, it's a dictatorship. And here's something we haven't really seen much: the corporate state. Now, what this means is not a state run by corporations, but rather a state operating as an incorporation of all the people within it. We haven't really seen much in terms of corporate states, but to give an idea, imagine if the labor unions, the big businesses, the small landowners, the petit bourgeois, all those people that you might break into different interest groups in Marxist analysis, or really any analysis, all had their own representatives in the state, and were working together as if it was one entity and not a bunch of competing interests. And of course you have technocracies, and I'm going to call them direct oligarchies because in truth oligarchy permeates a lot of these. For an example of direct oligarchy, think of Athens under Spartan occupation, and Sparta itself, which was a diarchy, two monarchs, which in practice was just an oligarchy. And I want you to honestly think about this. If we follow the definition of a republic up here, just a country without a monarch, everything below here, literally everything else would be a republic. Do you see where the issue comes here? Heck, even if we include direct democracy, or just actual democracy, even if we include that, think about how large this is and how varied it is. Sure, inherited theocracies would technically fall under the monarchy lens if you're stretching it. So let's say this is a monarchy, okay? Right. So this is a monarchy, already broad, but still you can understand it. It's a single individual who inherits by blood or noble election based on their blood ties and nobility. Makes sense. There's internal consistency here. Literally the only thing that unites a republic is the lack of a king. And as you can see, there's a lot of variety in what people want to do other than have a king. In all practical terms, republic being used to mean without a monarch is a very useless term. Sure, it may work now, because if you think about it, what are the current leading powers? Like, what are the current leading structures for managing a country? Can you think about it? We have constitutional republics, both parliamentary and presidential. Plenty of oligarchies and dictatorships. And of course, we also have a few monarchies. Most of them are constitutional, and generally speaking are much weaker than they used to be in terms of the age of absolutism and what a king or queen used to be able to do. All of this could probably work within the definition of a republic now, because you're not dealing with a lot of direct democracies, you're not dealing with technocratic states, you're dealing with some dictatorships, but you're not dealing with corporate states, and what theocracies do exist are very minor. Other than Iran, which can be argued, even then the Persians are kind of weird in that regard, and they definitely don't like it. See the current revolt going on there, which by the way is bloody, so not a good time to be Persian, or Iranian, whatever you want to call them. But Republic works, sort of, now, but doesn't really for both past and future analysis. Because think about it. There are plenty of arguments for a technocracy, plenty of arguments for oligarchy, a corporate state, and heck, even for a dictatorship. There are legitimately people who can make an argument for a dictatorship. But would you call all those people Republican? No, that's absurd. Just because they don't like having a king does not suddenly make them in favor of what we think of as a republic. It just doesn't really make much sense to classify all these things as one. This isn't a dichotomy. Like with, for example, let's take light and darkness. Some things are indeed defined by their lack of something. Light is something produced, so darkness is the lack of it. and you can plot how dark or how light something is by how much there is. But we're not dealing with that. What we're instead dealing with is monarchs, presidents, corporatists, dictators, technocrats, and many others. There are many points on this chart. There are many political beliefs that people are holding. It doesn't really make much sense to group them, all of these, as republics or Republican beliefs. These are not Republican. And yes, this may be confusing for those in the United States because we use Republican to mean a specific political party, but Republicans used to actually be specifically for those who supported republics. But calling all of that Republican doesn't really make much sense, does it? In all practical ways, they're entirely different methods of managing a country. Heck, even a socialist council republic is different from a parliamentary one or a presidential one. There's so many different ways to run a country because people have many ideas and many beliefs on what to do when running a country. So to just group in everything that doesn't want a monarch as supporting republics doesn't really make much sense in practice. And so, I would propose a different definition. A republic, I'd argue, is a country ruled by representatives, where instead of the people choosing, or some unelected bureaucrat, instead elected representatives run the country. This fits with the colloquial use of the term, is more practical for actually explaining things both in the past and future, and has a solid definition that doesn't rely on something else. Because while you can make a definition that is literally just the lack thereof, you can. It doesn't work in complex situations where there's a lot of different positions. You can say someone's not a communist, but that doesn't suddenly make them a capitalist. Or suddenly make them a liberal. Would it make sense to call everyone who disagrees with fascism liberal? No. Or everyone who disagrees with communism to be reactionary? No. There are many different flavors of politics, many different beliefs. Someone may disagree with communism because they're a social democrat and want progress, but don't believe that the best way to achieve it is a dictatorship of the proletariat. Or they don't believe that just collapsing everything and forming anarchist communes is very productive. There are several different positions, even within a very, very close belief system, like I just gave in regards to social democrats, communists, and anarchists. Fundamentally, there are many different varieties of beliefs and politics. And so our wording should reflect that. A republic, a dictatorship, a theocracy, a corporate state, a technocracy, oligarchy, and democracy should all be viewed as separate and distinct things so that we can say, okay, this person is this, and they believe this. And we're not confusing it with something that is very broad, especially when we want to get to specifics. And so, the most effective way is, of course, just breaking them down to what they want. A dictatorship is the rule by someone who doesn't want to hereditarily inherit, but still is in control. Whether by military justification, presidential decree, during a state of emergency, etc., etc. A technocrat is an unelected person chosen due to their skill or knowledge in a field. The logic being that if you have a bunch of unelected men of wisdom who run a state, they'd be better at managing it than, say, the whims of the people or an uneducated monarch. An oligarchy is literally just, we're the few, we have the power, we should run it. It is more efficient to break things up into more reasonable definitions, especially in politics. And of course, monarchy itself is a fairly specific thing. It's not completely specific, it covers a lot of ground, but the basics of it is fairly simple. And so republic should be the same. We don't want to have a Whig Democrat situation where it's literally just our entire existence is no you. That is impractical. And given the success of the Whigs, not very advisable. Yeah, for those who don't know, the American Whigs did not last too long, all things considered. The modern day Republicans have them beat by decades, if not a century. And so, in the end, I hereby propose we redefine the word republic to be a country ruled by elected representatives. It's simple. It adequately covers the colloquial definition and common knowledge, while also making a more efficient way to talk about things technically when we're getting into important subjects regarding what the best way to run a country is. That'll be all. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.